Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Um, I think we have a couple of requests where people are joining in, so we'll just take some time to, I'll quickly introduce myself before we go into the topic. This is one of the many sessions. This is a very recent initiative from our side where we are, uh, talking about certain topics, educating ourselves, and we wanted to extend this initiative to the world outside of locus as well, right? And this webinar, this 30-minute session, is essentially around that, where we ourselves internally at locus are rediscovering a lot of things, re-looking at supply chain in a very very different manner, and the idea is to share with some of you guys as well. Of course, the concept is for it to be kind of short and more interactive, which is why the number of people, I think the team has limited. With that, with that as a context, let me introduce myself. I am Krishna Khandelwal. I am the Chief Business Officer at Locus, taking care of the business globally. Um, Associated ever since we started, and currently running businesses in Indian subcontinent, Southeast Asia, Middle East, Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Europe, and North America, which is US and Canada. And the idea is to share some of the things which I'm looking at, how people are looking at supply chain now. And thank you for selecting the topic of logistics cost optimization. But before I go into the topic, I think we have everybody who had registered to join in today. I hope my sincere praise and wishes for everybody out there in these tough times. I wish safety for everybody out there. Slightly on the funny side, you can see what COVID has and lockdown has done to me. Being a sales guy, I'm not used to this. But jokes aside, I sincerely pray that we come out of these trying times soon, and with safety for everybody. The topic today, which we have chosen on the request from you guys, is logistics cost optimization. It's a very broad topic, and the way I wanted to start today was, we went around. Some of this also represent what we are seeing on the ground. Some of this is represented or collected from a lot of consulting firms out there. But if I bifurcate some of the logistics challenges, which in nutshell form the components of cost optimization of logistics, these are some of the major focus areas or biggest challenges, right? And transportation cost optimization, business process improvement, customer experience, which has been a very big focus over the course of last 2 to 3 years, ever since the emergence of e-commerce has happened in mainstream, and supply chain visibility. These are some of the topmost priorities or some of the topmost factors which contributes to logistics cost optimization. But we have a very interesting way of looking at things. If we look at the broader components of logistics cost optimization, which you saw in the previous slide, we can essentially bifurcate into two components. One is around digitizing your information, automating your day-to-day manual processes. And the second component is around digitization and automation of decision making. I think one of the biggest challenge when it comes to cost optimization is the extreme reliance on human decision making, and rightly so, because there is supply chain logistics has so much dependence on the tribal knowledge that human intervention is just absolute must, right? I think over the course of last 15 years, enterprises globally has gone ahead and done a phenomenal job of implementing ERPs, implementing basic softwares, which has given them a very good idea and a perspective of digitization of their information and automating basic processes. We believe that a lot of what we discussed in the previous slide, which I just showed, it actually can be bucketed into the next level of digitization, which will be around how can we automate decision making in supply chain? How can we take into account those human factors because of which the decision making has always been manual, right? And because a lot of focus areas and some of the key core challenges which supply chain professionals are focusing on um, is bucketed under the second component on how can we digitize decision making, right? So I'm going to focus a lot on that today, and a lot of the approach is very academic in nature because the idea for this session is actually learning, right? um, if we look at supply chain, if we get out of our day-to-day life, if we take a step back and if we reimagine our entire supply chain and we look at how the how the shipments are moving from origination to destination, and it goes through multiple nodes in between, right? If you imagine yourself in any of these nodes in supply chain, there are the decision making which is done by human beings. It involves multiple variables, it involves multiple constraints, it involves ever changing scenarios, right? Some of you guys who are on the call today, if they're involved in day-to-day operations planning, I'm sure you guys will attest to this, that how things are super ad hoc these days, and it's only going to become much and much more complex, right? But if you look at this from outside, multiple variables, multiple constraints, ever changing scenarios, it sounds hi, everybody's saying that they can't hear me. Okay, thank you. Mr. Sunil and Mr. Ganesh, they say that they can't. We're going to share the recording also, by the way, guys, with this. I'm sorry, but uh, guys in locals who are on the call, if I can do anything to make it better, please let me know. Yeah. Okay. I think with the way I'm talking, you could have figured it out that it sounds like we are making a person solve an extremely complex mathematical problem, and the complexity is visible. And historically, we have deployed a human being to solve some of these complex mathematical problems, which is what supply chain is, right? If you just have to go and evaluate every decision which you take every single day, and you will realize that the effort and the kind of problem you're solving is actually a problem which requires a little bit of math, some compute to be deployed, and then only it makes sense, right? Now, I'm going to address the most, I think, the most commonly talked about topic, right? And to be very honest, before we started the company, and while we were doing the customer surveys, practically everybody said the artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning. These are some of the buzzwords, right? Which will not work in case of supply chain logistics because you need that experience, you need that human intervention, and we could not agree more. You actually do need that, right? And I think one of the biggest things which we have learned in our journey is you can't try to solve supply chain by solving complex mathematical problems by deploying algorithms and neural networks only. You need to deploy human intuition, you need to learn to factor in the tribal knowledge of the decision makers. And that's where uh, for the first time, in like when we started working on it, we started realizing that this artificial intelligence is a broader technique, and deep learning and machine learning as a sub techniques of that are no longer mere just the buzzwords, right? And I'm sure each of us are using YouTube, and the recommendation engine over there is a very sophisticated machine learning engine. So from that perspective, some of these techniques actually have been commercialized, right? Now the idea was, how do we use this into a complex problem with supply chain is, right? And to be very honest, I don't think so this was this is something which is new, right? It's not that we had an idea like one night and we got up and we started building this. I think one of the biggest reasons why it is possible now and not 10 years back, because of three core things which is changing: data, network, and compute, right? And each of these three words are self-explanatory, but I mean, the amount of decisions which this person in the supply chain is making, the amount of compute required was never available. And finally, we have systems, we have compute, we have distributed computing, we have neural networks, which allows us to do some of these decision making, complex decision making, very, very fast, right? But let me now talk about why is it that this decision making, which we have been focusing over the last few minutes, is going to actually become all the more important, all the more difficult, right? And if you look at, and I see some of you guys are from FMCG, some of you guys are from 3PL, from e-commerce industry. In nutshell, if I sum total across all the industries, the demand, which used to be extremely static, well, not extremely, but it used to be static, is extremely dynamic, right? And a big component of that is being played by e-commerce, and not only B2C, but we're seeing a lot of impact of this in B2B. Your operating models, which was lesser in nature, now practically every city, right, every country, every region, there are new operating models coming in. Whether you are using cross-docking, whether you have hub and spoke model, whether you have hyper-local, whether you have omni-channel, the number of channels by which consumers can buy is increasing. Convenience, the customer's hunger for convenience is increasing. The number of competitors in your business, rise, is increasing. And because of the challenges, specifically in middle mile, last mile, traffic, restrictions by the government, regulations, compliance issues is only leading to increase in cost of logistics. If I sum together all of this, right, this problem actually becomes far more complex, right? And it already is. It just is unimaginable on how human beings can solve this problem anymore, right? Let me take a little bit further, right? And we have picked up some of the brand names from India, Amazon, everybody's aware of. But I want to talk about these two examples. There are two big e-commerce marketplaces in India, Flipkart and Amazon. And the idea is not to give an example of e-commerce. The idea is to talk about how fulfillment is no longer just a cost center, right? And how people need to focus on supply chain and decision making a lot more. And towards the end of the presentation today, I do have a small surprise to walk you through some of these case studies as well. If you look at the journey of Big Basket, how they have evolved over the course of, and they're a very well-known brand not only in Asia but actually globally, right? And one of the biggest differentiations between them and any other grocery platform globally is how early they were the adopters of supply chain decision making, right? How they started using algorithms, and they recently published a book in which their CEO talked about how in the very early days they took a call to implement algorithms in the supply chain versus human beings, right? If you look at Flipkart and Amazon, both of them are marketplaces. People go buy stuff. There are sellers who are selling stuff. In both of these platforms, the seller practically are actually same. But the differentiation comes from better customer experience, turnaround time, higher compliance to time slots, cost to deliver. This is what is driving people like us to differentiate or choose one platform over the other, right? And all of this summed together is fulfillment. All of this, what Big Basket is doing in terms of focusing on algorithms, is how fulfillment is now becoming a differentiation. Supply chain is now becoming a differentiation, not just a cost center, right? And if you look at some of the subcomponents of this, right, think about the decision making, think about the algorithms. If these brands would have not deployed these algorithms, they would not have been able to utilize this differentiation which fulfillment is, right? This slide would look crowded, but the idea is, I've been talking about decision making quite a lot, but let's talk, and we will share this across with you guys, so you don't have to really worry about it. But the idea is, if I look at the journey of a package from origination point to destination point and bifurcate the decision making into operational, tactical, and strategic, which is day to day, short to medium term, and long term, right? If you draw your supply chain and if you start writing the various decisions which are being taken every single day, right, there are a bunch of these decisions which requires automation, right? And the idea is, how do we go about choosing which decisions to automate? So this is a process which we believe, most of you guys on the call who are looking to digitize their decision making in supply chain, as we have established on how critical it is of course, to draw your supply chains, to write down your pain points. The first three steps sure make sense, but the most obvious step is, for each of the decisions which you want to automate, the the most important part is for you to figure out the size of the prize, right? Like, is it even worth for you to automate that decision? Is it even worth for you to deploy a deep tech algorithms, train your people to automate that decision, right? And one of the most critical things over here which I want to mention is, because your decision making is done using algorithms, right? And these algorithms can take into account a lot of real world constraints. For you to determine the size of the prize, it's not an expensive activity. Experimentation in supply chain is no longer an expensive activity, right? You can practically run simulations and figure out size of the prize. So one of the most advised, or the biggest advice from our side to each of you guys on the call today is, when you figure out how to figure out what decisions to automate, when you've drawn your supply chain and kind of taken down notes on what are the various decisions which human beings are taking in your day-to-day operations, the first and most obvious thing is to figure out what is the size of price for automating these decisions, right? And because it is all algorithmic, the the estimation of size of the price is not a long activity. It's a very short activity. It's an inexpensive activity. And once you do that, the other part which is most critical is, when you look at algorithms, when you look at some of these complex mathematical things, and there are a bunch of vendors available globally who are doing this. Not only is it important for you to figure out, can it solve the problem for me today, but also to figure out, can it solve the problem for me in future, right? Because although there are a lot of benefits of deploying algorithms to automate decision making, there is one downside to it, which is, once you deploy it, once you make people used to it, changing that becomes extremely difficult. So when you're deploying a solution, an algorithm, an optimization algorithm, what you need to also consider is, what can potentially happen to my business in next 2 to 3 years to 5 years, right? And can it actually take care of that? So being future ready is also an extremely important component of figuring out what decisions to automate, on top of size of the price, right? And the idea is, this is an experiment which is inexpensive and could be done simply because everything is now running on algorithms, right? And the team, please reach out to the team. We'll be happy to connect to tell you about the basic frameworks on how you should make these decisions as well. um, Across all of our customers, we have put together, the five key things which is required for you to automate your decisions in supply chain, right? The first and foremost thing is to define a blueprint or a process. When we try to go and deploy some of the deep tech solutions from locals to our customers' operations, the biggest problem actually is not that the deep tech is rejected by the customers. The biggest problem is, our customers don't know what their processes look like. They don't have a defined blueprint. They have been operating in a very, very ad hoc manner. We would advise that you take a step back, draw your supply chain, write down the standard operating procedures, and then you go ahead and iterate that depending on the feedback on the ground. The second one, which I covered a little bit in the previous slide, was agility of your tech platform. You not only do have to focus on what is happening today, but also have to focus on what this deep tech, what this decision making algorithm can do for me in future. Being future ready is extremely important. It is not only about the size of the prize, but it's about size of the prize and the platform or the algorithms making you future ready. Change management. Practically, you're trying to deploy the most sophisticated piece of tech out there to the lowest person in the hierarchy in your organization, right? But he is the most important key stakeholder. That gets neglected. Like, there has to be a very, very clear mechanism, incentivization, where you need to go and explain on what this technology is required to be done. We have had a lot of implementations which have gone completely wrong simply because the management went ahead and positioned the deep tech as deep tech, right? And I don't think so drivers or warehouse managers really care about it. Anything which you are deploying in terms of decision making, taking all the stakeholders, whether it's marketing, finance, procurement, sales, business. Again, another topic which leads to derailment or delays in a lot of implementations of some of these algorithms as far as decision making in supply chain is concerned is the stakeholders are not aligned to each other, right? And they have their own ambitions, they have their own. And if you are a large organization, stakeholder management is extremely critical over here. Um, I would strongly advise each of you guys to read this book. It says saying no to jugaad. Jugaad is a shortcut way of doing things. People who are joining us from India would know the word jugaad, but outside India, jugaad essentially is a shortcut way of doing things, right? And this book talks about how their approach towards supply chain decision making, right? They were probably the first ones to do this, and now they're reaping benefits of it. How? Um, if I kind of compare big baskets, and the idea is not to talk about locus over here. The idea is to talk about, because this is the case study or a success story which we are involved in. I just thought it's better to share what we have experienced with big basket, right? And when we started, it has been a long 5-year journey with us. If you look at the problem statement, right, when they started with Locus 5 years back, the problem statement was, we need to find an optimization algorithm because we are looking at cost reduction. This was 2016, right? In 2017, the problem statement became, we are okay with cost optimization. We need to start focusing on customer SLA compliance. When they did that, they said, okay, now we need to go same day deliveries. We need to launch dark stores. We need to launch to areas where the density of population is low. And we need to enhance our customer experience. Then 2019 came, right? And their idea was to achieve profitability. So you see how every single year over the course of last 5 years, they have had this renewed objective, and it will happen. Your businesses will evolve. Your objectives will change. We are all amidst a COVID scenario, and I'm sure post COVID, a lot of businesses would be focusing on cost optimization, right? How can we do our job better and more efficiently? And it will keep changing. One of the most important thing, uh, which I believe in this story you need to pick up from, is to be able to launch this new objective every single year. You of course definitely can't spend few months to experiment or pilot it out. And this is one of the biggest benefit of digitizing your decision making is the experimentation becomes fast. Your business objectives keep changing, which basically means that you don't really need to deploy people to experiment something on the ground, collect feedback, and then iterate, right? A lot of the job is done using algorithms. And I believe this is a success story, a case study, which talks about how they evaluated, how they were the early ones to, think of decision making. Now that we have a very established case study, not only with Big Basket, but globally with a lot of companies, I don't think so. It's debatable to, it's even right to debate whether it's a right approach to digitize decision making or not. But I think we need to start looking forward. And yeah, I'm happy to now address questions. But I just wanted to wrap up the quick learning session over here, and we'll have the more in future. Given these are the few initial ones, we would love for you to share the feedback with the team on how we can improve this further, right? If we should go more detailed, deep dive into some of the topics, or rather keep it more broad, and I'm hopeful that the team will be able to do the job and improve on the feedback. Thank you so much. I think there are some questions. Let me let me pick up some of those questions. Yeah, I think in the one of the questions which I can address, which is around the COVID scenario, is the question reads how to tackle fulfillment and minimize cost in parallel for essential businesses, right? And uh, about 75 to 80% of Locus's business comes from essentials category. And one thing which we have done over the course of, or which we are seeing our customers doing over the course of last few weeks is some of these newer operating models or some of these newer offerings to customers like same day deliveries or definite time slot deliveries has been completely waived off, because although these things drive better customer experience, but at this point of time, I think a lot of focus is on just ensuring the deliveries gets done in the most safest manner possible. The other problem is, how do you manage it in the scenario where you have non-availability of drivers or reduced workforce on the ground? And I think one of the key things which I want to highlight again here is, in the scenarios, if you're an essential business, your volumes would have skyrocketed at least 30 to 40% in the last few weeks, with lesser availability of fleet on street or fleet on ground. I can't even imagine how would you be running your business if you don't have some of these algorithms or decision making things installed in your supply chain, right? Um, yeah, Shobit, I don't know if that answers your question, but essentially, like we are seeing people who are able to manage essentials, the skyrocketing demand for them with lower availability of fleet on street. They're able to do it successfully because they were the ones who took this decision 2 3 years back to rely on algorithms a lot more than human beings, and they're able to cater to their demand right now. Yeah, one of the things which the transition of adopting a deep tech solution or algorithms to automate a decision making is around, Prabhakar has asked this question around change management, right? And one of the other things which I want to talk about in terms of algorithms is, it gives you a lot of flexibility to go phase by phase approach, right? Like because the idea is, you should start with something which is likable to people on the ground, make them adhere to it, and behind the scenes it's nothing but a mere change in small configuration in the algorithm, right? And as people get used to it, you should keep maturing, keep working on these algorithms to keep improving with time. But the idea is, because it is so mathematical, it is so scientific in nature, actually change management in case of deep tech solution, if deployed really really smartly, could be dramatically easier or relatively easier compared to what an ERP implementation for you guys will look like, right? There are some other questions out there, but given we are out of time, we would be replying back to each of you guys. This deck will also be shared with each of you guys. But if you have more questions, please do reach out to the team. Thank you so much, everyone. And once again, I wish safety to each of you, to your friends and family around you. Hope we come out of this situation soon. And if you need any other help, please do reach out to our team. Contact@locus.sh, and we'll be more than happy to help you guys out. Thank you so much.